Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about must-draft running backs for the 2020 fantasy football season. Yes, we're talking about running backs, but not just any running back. We're talking about rookie running backs in specific. And why? Well, from 2012 through 2018, we saw at least one rookie running back finish as an RB1 in half PPR scoring formats. I mean, when we think about the last couple seasons, Ezekiel Elliott in 2016 finishes the number 2 overall back. The following season, we saw Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt finishes the number 3 and 4 in half PPR. And then in 2018, Saquon Barkley came onto the scene and absolutely took over as he finishes the number 2 overall back himself. Now, unfortunately, this past season in 2019, we didn't see a running back finishes in top 12, but that was mainly due to the lack of opportunity or potentially an injury taking place because, to be honest, Josh Jacobs was on pace to finishing as a top 12 back without a doubt in my mind. So when we think about running backs in the current system, there's got to be one of these rookie running backs that are going to come onto the scene, join their respective team, and potentially take said opportunity and run away with it, because we've seen rookies do that year after year in the National Football League without a doubt. So I'm potentially thinking that there's got to be at least one running back in this class, specifically a couple of the earlier picks, that are going to be given said opportunity, that can definitely run away with the job and become RB1s in 2020. And when we can take them at a potentially discounted price, because of everything that's happened, a lack of training camp and not a lot of teams in your respective fantasy leagues valuing these players as much, I think we could potentially have a jackpot on our hands. So let's talk about some rookie running backs, some must-draft guys, starting off with the thumbnail himself, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a running back out of Louisiana State University, LSU. They're national champions. He was the first running back to come off the board in the 2020 NFL draft. The very last pick of the first round, the Kansas City Chiefs invested in another running back because they need another running back. Let's think about what the Kansas City Chiefs dealt with last season. I mean, besides the fact that they had injuries galore at the running back position, and they ended up seeing Damian Williams go down, LaShawn McCoy go down, and they just had to rotate a plethora of running backs. It just wasn't a great use of talent and or money for this organization. They can continue to potentially give 5 different guys opportunities in this backfield, but what they want to do overall is find their Kareem Hunt that unfortunately they lost years ago because of the off the field issues, and they want to find him in the opportunity they're going to give Clyde Edwards-Helaire this season. Now, when we look at the stats that he produced last season at LSU, 215 total attempts on the ground for 1,414 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns, 64 targets, 55 receptions, 453 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Overall, had a fantastic season at LSU, obviously because of the talent surrounding him, making him that much better. Now, when we looked at what he was capable of doing, besides forcing 71 missed tackles, breaking 14 tackles, having 782 yards after contact, this is just a different running back. And when we think about the fact that he's a 5'8", 207-pound running back, kind of a Darren Sproles-sized running back, the ability to make contact at the line of scrimmage and just power through and continue to rack up 782 yards after contact, it's unbelievable. And then when we went a little bit deeper on the research, we found that Clyde Edwards-Helaire wanted to run the ball up the middle. I mean, 894 of his 1,414 rushing yards, almost 63%, came from the A and B gaps. I mean, he's running it up the middle with his small stature, and he's definitely gaining yards because he's getting fired out of a cannon. I mean, this is a quick running back. Sure, 4.6 speed is not breakaway, potential where he's going to rip off huge runs and kill people in the NFL, and defenses aren't going to fear that speed too much, but he's deceptively quick and agile, to say the least. He did, with his 4.6 speed, break out 21 carries of 15 plus yards, and he had a 44.7% breakaway percentage. What that means is that 44% of his yards came from plays of 15 plus yards. So those 21 carries led to a lot of his yardage this last season, but that's just how college football works. When you play against lesser defenses, when you play against a team and he has 6 carries for 188 yards like he did last season, it's definitely going to, play a pretty big role there in terms of his total success. But either way, when I went down and I looked at Clyde Edwards and I tried to break down his film because I want to know what kind of a running back he truly is. I want to see if he passes the eye test. I had to go and I had to find competition. And when I looked at all the games, I mean, they smoked every team this year. They went undefeated. LSU really didn't have a problem. And even in the games, like against Georgia, when I went and watched, even when he struggled on the ground, he was able to make it up through the air. And this is why Clyde Edwards is such an incredibly valuable running back, especially in fantasy. Not only does he have the ability to run the ball and be a goal line back and do everything in that nature, also pass block, he's an extremely valuable receiving back. I mean, when we go and we look at, the film from against Georgia, the dude tore them up in the passing game. And then I wanted to go ahead and take another step. I wanted to go and watch film against Alabama because I know that is the best competition. They're typically going to play on a yearly basis. And he absolutely torched Alabama this last season. He had 103 total rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 9 receptions for 77 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. He absolutely annihilated that team. And yes, there were times where he was getting stuffed in the backfield because of his offensive line and because of how talented Alabama's defense was last season. But even then, he ended up making plays when there was no play to be made. He was getting hit in the backfield 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and he was able to spin off contact and make a play, score a touchdown when you thought it wasn't possible. When Joe Burrow is being pressured on 3rd and 11s, Clyde Edwards were able to catch the ball out of the backfield and make a first down happen. He's one of the more talented backs, but I want to talk about what he's capable of doing, especially going into the 2020 fantasy football season, because that's why we're here. So now that we've reviewed all of his stats, let's talk about the opportunity, the potential of Clyde Edwards. As of right now, he's coming off the board as the first rookie running back. I think he's coming off the board on average about RB13 in mock drafts. At that current position, it could be even higher. Just depends on who you play with. At this moment in time, the Kansas City Chiefs are without a doubt going to give him a good amount of opportunity. Why? Because there is opportunity to be had. They're not going to have LaShawn McCoy back there. We're not going to see, Darrell Williams come out of nowhere. I don't even think Damian Williams is, going to have much of a say. From all of the interviews that I've seen and all of the talk around Kansas City's organization, it looks to be that Damian Williams is there just to teach this guy the tricks of the trade here and there. Otherwise, they're handing off the job to Clyde Edwards. And to be honest, last season, there was 300 total rushing attempts from running backs from the Kansas City Chiefs offense, over 100 targets out of the backfield for running backs. That kind of opportunity is going to lead to success, because the last time we saw a single running back have the 20 touch per game kind of opportunity in the Kansas City Chiefs offense was Kareem Hunt in 2017 and 2018. In that time, in those 27 games that he played with the Chiefs, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format. So when we think about what Clyde Edwards is capable of doing in the passing game, in the running game, when we step up and we think, okay, they're trying to hand him the job of the future, and the running backs in his backfield have not stayed healthy over time. I mean, even Darwin Thompson was drafted last season. He wasn't even able to make a dent in terms of offensive opportunity and contributing to this team. So when we have the opportunity of Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in and being the Kareem Hunt of this team, it leads to me thinking there's going to be a lot of success here, and he potentially is the guy that you want on your roster that's going to be the rookie that breaks into the top 12 this year. Now, sure, Kareem Hunt in his rookie season had the benefit of, unfortunately, Spencer Ware getting hurt and having a season-ending ACL injury in the preseason. That might be the case, but we're never going to just assume that an injury is going to take place. But if Damian Williams keeps on track and does get injured again, Clyde Edwards is going to take that job from him, whether it's in the preseason, in training camp, or when the regular season finally begins, because eventually Damian Williams, his body's going to give out on him a little bit, and Clyde Edwards is there to swoop up the opportunity and run away with it. Now, the beautiful thing about being a running back in the Kansas City Chiefs offense is the fact that defenders are not going to fill the box. When I watched them against 8+ defenders, Clyde Edwards was still able to take on Alabama's defense and contribute and produce incredible numbers. I mean, there's a couple highlights where he's, pretty much getting swamped in the backfield. He breaks it to the outside, stiff arms 2 guys, falls into the end zone because nobody's trying to fully tackle him. Against 8 in the box. When we think about what Damian Williams did last season, when I looked at next gen stats by NFL, Damian Williams only faced 8+ defenders 8% of the time last season. If we end up seeing that similarly to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because of the fact that he's such a threat in the passing and Patrick Mahomes' threat as a whole, Mecole Hardman, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, defensive coordinators are going to be worried about other stuff rather than Clyde Edwards. He's going to run rampant on defenses. That's what I end up potentially seeing. Now, the last piece of information in terms of his opportunity. When we talk about Andy Reid as the head coach in the new Super Bowl win, the first Super Bowl of his career just this past season, congratulations to him. When we talk about him and his coaching style and the opportunities and the offensive coordinators that he surrounds himself with, throughout his entire career, Andy Reid as a head coach has produced 11 RB1s in his last 16 seasons in half PPR. So honestly, you're probably hitting more than you're missing. In the last couple seasons, because of Kareem Hunt's absence, it's definitely made a difference. But when Kareem Hunt was there, he was a top 12 guy. This last season wasn't the case. The year before Kareem Hunt arrived with Spencer Ware and all that kind of jazz didn't really count. So to be honest, as of late, they've been missing more often than not. And I think this number is going to get back on track, and they're going to produce another RB1. Again, when I put on the tape for Clyde Edwards, he's a physical running back. Even though he's not a big guy, he is a physical running back. The yards after contact makes a big difference. But when I want to look at a running back and determine what kind of skill he has, whether he passes my eye test, I want to understand the intelligence of said running back. I want to understand that he understands his own blocking schemes. He knows how to follow his offensive lineman. He's patient in the backfield, and he's willing to wait a couple seconds, then visualize with ball carrier vision, and then make the right decision. He absolutely does that. On top of it, he even contributed as a kick returner last year. Not even that. They lined him up outside as a wide receiver a lot last season, a lot more than a lot of people probably anticipate if you didn't watch film. This is a guy that can be moved everywhere around the field. He could be used in special teams. And that's why the Kansas City Chiefs wanted him in the first round. Sure, he might not beat you in a foot race. He might not be the fastest player on the field, but he's definitely one of the most athletic and agile. His cuts in the backfield, his side steps, his side hops, these are things that are just, when we go watch the tape, it's detrimental. People were getting put on the ground. He was taking ankles left, right, and center. On top of it, after he gets out of the backfield, he's going to have a pretty decent offensive line in Kansas City. After he gets out of the backfield, the next thing is how capable is he to making defenders miss in the second and third level. Of all the running backs that I'm going to talk about today, he is the most successful in the second and third level of making defenders miss without a doubt, because he has to make up for his lack of speed, right? And that's, where his short legs and his ability to be elusive comes in, his potentially his most valuable asset. The ability to make defenders miss, to run them over regardless of size, to always work for extra yards. He's just a fantastic running back. He can do it on all three downs. He's a pass blocking guy as well. When we look at what LSU running backs have been, Leonard Fournette, Darius Geis, Jeremy Hill, even Spencer Ware. Kansas City Chiefs, Spencer Ware was the guy that went to LSU. They always produce pretty good running backs. And I think Clyde Edwards is not going to, lack in the total opportunity. He's definitely going to have the talent to act upon it. He should be great. All right, moving on. Let's talk about my next running back on today's list. Talking about my number 2 running back and the guy that's coming off the board as a second running back in fantasy drafts right now in mock drafts, Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor is one of the more interesting running backs overall because what he's accomplished in his NCAA career, a lot of running backs have never done. Besides the fact that he surpassed 2,000 rushing yards in the past 2 seasons of his NCAA career, sure, running backs have done that in the past. Another Wisconsin Badger, Melvin Gordon, did that his final year at Wisconsin. But Jonathan Taylor has put up 2,003 rushing yards, 2,194 rushing yards, and 1,977 rushing yards in the past 3 seasons at Wisconsin. He's been incredible. He's been absolutely unstoppable. And as the seasons have progressed, he has improved, and he's even improved in the passing game, which without a doubt, NFL prospects or scouts are going to look for in prospects. So they made it a concerted effort. We have to feed him the ball. We have to get him better in the passing game. He's improved in that as well because he went from catching 8 balls a season to 26 just this past season. Incredible improvement overall. Let's go ahead and look at what he did. 320 rushing attempts. Again, he's had over 300 touches each of the last 3 years at Wisconsin. When we think about running backs, that takes a toll on your body, certainly. And typically we want running backs that come out of college that don't have a lot of mileage on them, but hopefully Jonathan Taylor can go ahead and fight through that, because where he's going in Indianapolis, it's going to look a lot like Wisconsin in terms of blocking because of how talented they are there. But regardless, 320 rushing attempts this past season, 2,003 total rushing yards, 21 rushing touchdowns, 37 passing targets for 26 receptions, 252 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. I mean, beautiful stats. When we looked at what he accomplished at the combine, besides the fact that he had a 4.39 40 speed, his measurables overall everywhere, whether it was 10-second split, the cone drill, bench press, everything, vertical jump, long jump, doesn't matter. He just completely annihilated the testing. I mean, of all the running backs that I've seen and I compared him to, he really had all the measurables for a successful running back in the National Football League. We take into account 5'10", 226 pounds, lean muscle running back, has the height and size. We don't really, I mean, height and running back doesn't really make a difference, but at least he has the weight that is going to prevent injuries and also be able to help him lean into his shoulder, fight behind his pads and run defenders over, regardless. Besides the fact that all these ridiculous stats, he forced 87 missed tackles last season, had 1,257 yards after contact. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with him last season, or the last 3 seasons, was that he's fumbled the ball and lost 17 fumbles in the last 3 years. That is an incredibly dangerous number. When we talk about running backs that fumble in the National Football League, like Chris Carson, you can lose your job in a single game because of the fact that you fumble. I mean, if you go and look at what Sean Payton does, if you fumble in Sean Payton's backfield, you're never touching the ball again for the rest of that game. There are different coaches, and I don't know how Frank Wright is going to approach this for the Indianapolis Colts, but there are different approaches to whether what you do to punish a running back that fumbles. Hopefully, this doesn't follow him to the NFL, but he's definitely a guy that when I watch film, defenders are trying to rip the ball out specifically. They're going for arm tackles rather than trying to go for his thighs because they know they're going to get cracked. So they go for the ball, and sometimes they find success there. Regardless, moving on. He had 30 carries of 15 plus yards. 39.3% of his yards came from breakaway runs, which was those 30 carries for 15 plus yards. This is a guy that in Wisconsin, you're going to, there's like a lint flying in the air. You're going to have breakaway runs because of how incredibly gifted the offensive line is there, just plowing over defenses and a lack of competition, to be honest. Again, 4.39 speed is deadly. And he looks like that. I mean, he gets shot out of a cannon out of the backfield. And to be honest, Jonathan Taylor really has one speed. He doesn't really break down in the third level to juke defenders. He uses his speed and just wants to get away from defenders. He broke a college record last season. He is the only running back in college football history, I think, or he tied the record for 12 games of 200 plus rushing yards in a college career. Absolutely incredible numbers. So let's get to brass tacks, okay? We'll talk about what he's done against better defenses and a lack of defenses and all that kind of jazz, but I want to talk about what he's going to potentially do for the Indianapolis Colts this season. I mean, when we look about, think about Wisconsin running backs, we've seen successful ones in the past. I mean, Melvin Gordon again, James White. There have been a bunch of successful Wisconsin running backs. This guy's done it for the last 3 years there. He's going to the NFL now. And in my opinion, he's going to be playing behind the best offensive line in the National Football League. In terms of rushing and run blocking, they have the best run blocking offense. It's night and day. It's not even close. They have some of the best offensive linemen in the league. So when we think about what Marlon Mack has done in the last couple of years, Marlon Mack has averaged 4.5 yards per carry in the last 2 seasons, has scored 18 touchdowns, has had over 2,000 total yards in this offense, and has not been, really used in the passing game very much. Well, that's because of the fact that he's not very much used because he doesn't have the talent in comparison to Nyheim Hines. But Jonathan Taylor has proven that he can be a 3-down back without a doubt. On top of it, Marlon Mack has never spent an entire season in the starting lineup. He has missed, in the last 3 seasons of his career, at least 2 games minimum each season. And that's been very detrimental for him because not only does he have to battle back from injury, but he has to come back and still compete with other running backs in his own backfield. Again, that's something that if in fact happens this season, if Marlon Mack goes down early, Jonathan Taylor is taking the job and not giving it back to him. And that's why I think Jonathan Taylor is such a valuable prospect in fantasy football this year because, to be honest, he's going to take the job and potentially run away with it and never give it back because of how talented he is overall. There's a huge market of opportunity here. There's potentially 300 plus rushing attempts in this backfield. With Phillip Rivers in the lineup, the offense is going to be far better, especially because he has an arm that's, in my opinion, far more accurate and far more mature than a guy like Jacoby Brissett, who's still trying to figure it out. When you get Phillip Rivers in the lineup, the offense is going to improve. Sure, Nyheim Hines is going to come in here and there for some receiving threat on third down, but Jonathan Taylor could easily run away with this job, and behind this offensive line, just be unstoppable in the AFC South. So, outside of having the best offensive line in the league, being a Wisconsin running back, what I saw on tape from Jonathan Taylor is just speed, right? Like when I compare him with Clyde Edwards has the ability to be elusive and juke people and shatter ankles in the second and third level. Jonathan Taylor fires off out of a cannon and will either stiff arm you or make one quick cut, and that's it. In the second and third level, that's all he's capable of. And to be honest, in the NCAA, that's perhaps all you need. You don't need an extra move. You can run somebody over, you can stiff arm them, or you can make a one-step cut. That's pretty much all he showed outside of that in terms of his speed. Sure, he's got great lateral movement behind the line of scrimmage, but typically he never really had to show that off because of how well the blocking schemes, transpired for the Wisconsin offense. Sure, he never goes down after first contact. He is a big running back. He plays behind his pads. I mean, he's never going to take too much damage on these hits anyway because he's the one that's the hammer and the defenders are often the nail. Either way, Jonathan Taylor is one of the better running backs. He is going into an incredibly advantageous opportunity in Indianapolis, and I won't be surprised if he runs away with it and becomes a top 12 back just because of that. Either way, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the next rookie running back on our must-draft list, DeAndre Swift. Now, DeAndre Swift's another interesting one of these backs. Again, DeAndre Swift is not a small back in comparison to like a Clyde Edwards. He's more of an average-sized back, similar to a guy like Jonathan Taylor, but he doesn't have as much weight. The thing that DeAndre Swift holds, and a lot of people kind of had him as their number one running back of the draft class. I was kind of surprised that was the case because when I watched film, I didn't really see the number one running back kind of pop off screen for me. He didn't really pop out to me. I mean, sure, he was filling up the stat sheet, but I don't know if it was to the point where I was completely blown away. Sure, last season, 196 total rushing attempts. That was mainly because he missed a couple games with injury, but we'll talk about that. 1,218 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 29 targets, 24 receptions for 216 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 40 missed tackles forced, 700 yards after contact. 31% of his total rushing attempts led to either a first down or a touchdown in Georgia. 18 carries of 15 plus yards, which led to his 37.5% of his yards being breakaway yards overall. 4.48 speed, deadly. I mean, burners for sure, but not Jonathan Taylor speed for sure. So either way, all in all, DeAndre Swift is a very interesting back. When I wanted to go and I wanted to find competition of him playing against one of the better defenses, I tried to go see what he did in like the late half. I wanted to see him play against LSU. Unfortunately, he got injured in the late half of the season with a shoulder injury, and he's dealt with injuries in his college career. And when we talk about Lions running backs and injuries, I don't want to think about DeAndre Swift coming into this organization, having a pretty good start, and then getting injured, and them potentially losing this talent, similar to how they've dealt with Kerryon Johnson the last couple of years. So that's unfortunate. But overall, we've seen him produce well. I mean, he plays well against good defenses, but to be honest, he hasn't been tested enough, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the brass tacks. Let's talk about the Lions and their offense overall. The Lions haven't had an RB1 since 2013 in a half PPR format, which was Reggie Bush. So they've been, lacking the running back position, but what Matt Patricia's been trying to do, they're trying to re-emulate a little bit of that New England Patriots offense. They want a bunch of running backs in the backfield, and they want them all to contribute, and they want them all to be great. They wanted to do that with Kerryon Johnson being the lead guy. Unfortunately, last 2 seasons has been injured and has not been able to act upon said opportunity. But when we think about the opportunity that he has gotten and the running backs in his backfield have gotten, last season the running backs in his backfield had 353 total rushing attempts and 70 targets. those kind of numbers going in the direction of DeAndre Swift, the guy that doesn't have much mileage. Again, besides the 196 rushing attempts, his last season at Georgia, he had 163 the year before, and he still broke 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So when I'm thinking about what he could potentially do in a Lions offense, there's a lot of opportunity to be had. And with Kerryon Johnson consistently getting injured, only playing 18 of his 32 games in the past 2 seasons, I really do think that DeAndre Swift can easily win the job here because he is, in my opinion, more talented running back at this moment in time. Like when we looked at the tape of Kerryon Johnson last season, he didn't really have much burst. His yards per carry average were low. 3.6 last season? His yards after contact was only 2.7 last season. I think he had only one rush of over 15 plus yards. His longest rush of last season in 8 games was 20 yards. He had no burst, had no breakaway, and still managed to average 10 fantasy points per game. Can you imagine that? 4 touchdowns in 8 games, 10 fantasy point per game average for Kerryon Johnson last year. Imagine what DeAndre Swift will be capable of doing with his speed, his athleticism, in this offense that has improved their offensive line. With Matthew Stafford back, with the healthy receivers that are surrounding Matthew Stafford, whether it's Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, Hawkins, and Amendola, they have talent on this team, certainly. And I do think that DeAndre Swift coming into this offense with the ability to catch the ball like he has, and then go ahead and break off big runs here and there, I'm excited to see what DeAndre Swift is capable of doing. Now, DeAndre Swift, when I watch the film, he's a zone scheme runner. What does that mean? In a zone scheme, it's typically zone right, zone left. The offensive line is blocking right, so the running back can go left, or vice versa, or it's just straight man blocking. When I watch the film, the offensive line in Georgia is always good. I mean, they make great running backs there. Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Todd Gurley, they make great running backs there. But it really gave the decision-making process to DeAndre Swift. So when I looked at his film and I decided, okay, let's see here. What kind of intelligence does this guy have? Is he able to read blocks? He certainly was able to, and he was certainly able to determine what was failing and what was going to be a success before he even got to the hole. And that's why he was so successful. He would get to the hole right as it was about to open because he's been able to read his offensive linemen so well over the last couple of seasons that it's maybe become second nature for him at that point. Outside of that, he's a cutback runner, he's a zone runner, and he's a one-cut runner. What does that mean? As a cutback runner, this is a guy that wants to set the edge with his speed, but then as soon as he sets the edge and defenders are starting to swarm the outside, he'll cut back behind his offensive line. That's what zone running is. That's what zone schemes are. One-cut runner, similar to Jonathan Taylor, when he's in the second or third level, all he has to do is put his leg into the ground, boom, step the opposite direction, defenders are on skates. Honestly, overall, one of the better running backs. I didn't think he popped off on screen as much as a lot of other draft analysts, but I'm not a draft analyst. I'm a fantasy football guy, but I've been coaching football for quite some time now, playing football for quite some time now. So to be honest, didn't really make me feel a certain way about him. But regardless, elusive behind the line of scrimmage, can make second level defenders miss. Third level, it's just all speed. He gets to the third level, he's just going to burn you. He's not really going to toy around with you and try to snap your ankles. Typically, people can't even catch him at that point. So he's far and away gone. But either way, I think of the 3 running backs that we mentioned, he is probably my third favorite because of the opportunity that he'll be given in the backfield again. Outside like Theo Riddick being like a top 24 guy the last couple years in the passing game, we really haven't seen much. If he's going to be given the opportunity in the passing game that we expect, then DeAndre Swift can definitely run away with it and separate himself from Kerryon Johnson. But regardless, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the last running back on today's list. Now, Cam Akers is interesting because Cam Akers is similar to these other running backs walking into an extremely advantageous scenario. He's 5'10", 217 pounds, good size running back, played at Florida State. Florida State was one of the worst teams. So we'll talk about that as we progress, but they were a 6-6 football team. The talent that surrounded Cam Akers really was detrimental to him. Yet, with all that said, he was still able to produce last season pretty good numbers in my opinion. 213 rushing attempts, 1,142 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, 38 targets, 30 receptions. Unfortunately, dropped a couple more passes than he probably should have, but he can get those back. 225 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. 76 forced tackles missed, 19 forced tackles missed on receptions. That's absolutely fantastic. 904 yards after contact. He's a strong running back. 5'10", 217 pounds, might not look like a guy that's going to run you over. He truly will. I mean, those thighs that are on screen, those are like Saquon. I mean, they're not Saquon thighs. He's not going to clean you out like that, but he's definitely going to impose his will and run over defenders. He's a strong back, and it really helped him in pass blocking scenarios, right? When I went back and I looked at film against some of the better teams, against like a Florida, he played really well in the passing game. Besides that, as a pass blocker, which is going to pay dividends in the NFL, it'll get him on the field more often. Regardless, 15 carries of 15 plus yards, 4.47 speed, 33.3% of his yards came away from breakaway percentage. But again, a lack of talent at LSU. Now, what does that mean? His offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus, was ranked 129 out of 130 in the NCAA last season, in whatever metric they statted out. That's incredibly ridiculously bad. I mean, the adjectives that I had to use for this, it doesn't say enough. 129 out of 130. They were the second worst offensive line in the NCAA last season. On top of it, their quarterback situation. I don't know if you guys have watched games. I watched the Clemson film. I mean, they were getting just... Was it the Clemson film? Oh, I got to actually confirm this. Let's go ahead and let me look this up. I think, because I've been watching so much film in the last couple of days, it's all blurring. Did they play Clemson? Yeah, they did play Clemson. Okay, good. The Clemson film was, it was hard to watch. The quarterbacks there were just getting blitzed. He was picking up a lot of pass protection and playing well. The offensive line was a mess. I mean, Cam Akers was getting caught in the backfield every single time. The passing attempts that he had, the targets that he had, 10 yards over his head at times. I mean, just terrible opportunity for him in an offense that just was miserable against top-level teams. And that's going to happen. But the opportunity that he walks into in Los Angeles with the Rams, I can tell you, is one of the best, if not the best, amongst all these running backs, without a doubt. With Todd Gurley gone, you have Malcolm Brown and you have Darrell Henderson. Two guys that couldn't beat a one-legged Todd Gurley in terms of touches last season. Todd Gurley scored 54 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons, 2017, 2018, 2019. No player in the National Football League outside of quarterback has done that. Has scored 54 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. On top of it, he's had 80 targets in the passing game in 2017 and 2018. We saw a little bit of a dip this past season, again, injured. Has had 171 red zone rushing attempts in the last 3 years and 32 red zone targets in the last 3 years. Todd Gurley is leaving a giant hole of opportunity for running backs. Now, whether the Los Angeles Rams and Sean McVay decide to make this a running back by committee or allow somebody to win this job in training camp, because I've seen a couple interviews here and there, Sean McVay is open to the opportunity of a guy winning this job. He says, if someone wants to run away with it, then they definitely can, and we'll give them the opportunity there. If Cam Akers is able to do that at training camp this year or early in the season, if he's able to run away with the job for the Los Angeles Rams, the opportunity is there. This is an offense that is going to score. I mean, they won 9 games last year, and that was the worst season that I've seen them produce in quite some time. They really didn't look good, and they won 9 games. Overall, when I look at the competition that he has in the backfield, Darrell Henderson didn't get any opportunity last year, and he was a 2nd-round pick. Why? Because Darrell Henderson maybe is just not as good as people assume. I mean, his pass blocking grade is definitely not going to help him stay on the field. Sure, he's a burst runner with a lot of speed, but in comparison to a Cam Akers has got that speed. Cam Akers has the elusiveness that potentially Darrell Henderson doesn't have. Because when I watched Darrell Henderson tape last season, he was a breakaway runner. He got the ball, and he was gone. Down the sideline, and just no one was catching him. That's the kind of runner he is. Now, sure, in an offense that could potentially get him out into open space, he could definitely take care of that and act upon said opportunity, but I don't think that's going to be the case in the National Football League. You don't really get those kind of opportunities very often. I think Cam Akers is like a magician. He makes something out of nothing far too often. I mean, the amount of times that I saw him swarmed in the backfield and be able to make a cutback run and pick up 12 yards when he was supposed to have -7 is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the ball carrier vision that he had to have last season to know that, oh my God, my offensive line is already falling apart and I haven't even touched the ball. The ability to be able to react immediately and make plays on the dime and produce with the speed that he has, the ability to make, just defenders miss. And then just not only that, run over defenders consistently. He's going to run through arm tackles, certainly. He'll run through defenders if they just try to trade up, tackle him on top of it. He's a strong guy. He'll stiff arm you to the ground. It doesn't really matter. Makes great moves at the line of scrimmage. All these running backs are talented in their own respective form. In terms of elusiveness, he's probably one of the best. I think he might be the best of the 4 running backs I've talked about today. And I really love what Clyde Edwards-Helaire brings as a running back in his elusiveness. I even think that a guy like Akers might be better in elusiveness overall. But again, that's just my eye test. Overall, he has an incredible opportunity in Los Angeles, and a guy that, in my opinion, if he runs away with it, could be a dominating force in the coming years. And that's why he's a must-draft guy, because of the opportunity that is going to potentially, come into his direction in Los Angeles. Regardless, a couple honorable mentions. Keyshawn Vaughn, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss. We'll talk about these guys in the future. These guys are sleeper. Even Joshua Kelly, in my opinion. A.J. Dillon. Darrington Evans. There are a lot of running backs that I'm not going to mention today, right? Because, again, we want to keep it a little bit shorter video. But I don't think these guys are must-draft. I think these are sleeper guys that you can get later in your rounds and you can wait for. Because, to be honest, Keyshawn Vaughn, when I watched his film, he's a north-south runner. He's a big guy that wants to run downhill. I think Ronald Jones is a better running back than him. I've seen a couple runs from Ronald Jones last season, just kind of studying his improvement from college to the NFL, and obviously he's had 2 years of NFL experience now. He's improved, and I think he's better running back than a guy like Keyshawn Vaughn. When I look at J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, when we go watch the film, I mean, this guy is literally ripping off huge runs because the Ohio State offensive line is just cleaning people out. He's just ripping off huge runs. And sure, that's beautiful. We love it. We love to see it. He's got great speed, but he's behind 2 of the guys that are just going to take too many rushing attempts. I mean, Mark Ingram, still there, still very talented. J.K. Dobbins is going to have to sit back and watch him and learn, right? He might play the Gus Edwards role, still get maybe 70, 80, 100 rushing attempts, but is he going to be a guy that you start on a weekly basis? I'm not sure, especially with Mark Ingram scoring double-digit touchdowns. Lamar Jackson running the ball 170 plus times. He's scoring, 7, 8 rushing touchdowns himself. There's not a lot of opportunity in that backfield to have unless somebody goes out with an injury. But again, all these guys can benefit from injury, certainly. And then Zach Moss. I don't know if, you guys like the way that the Buffalo Bills run the ball. I don't. I don't think there's, much to happen there, but I could change my mind. I don't think he's a must draft as of this moment in time, but either way, he's a sleeper. Regardless, that's all I wanted to mention. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hopefully, you enjoyed today's content. If you did, don't forget, subscribe to the channel for more 2020 fantasy football content. We're going to be starting to ramp up, get more content out as soon as possible. Like today's video. It really does help me out a lot. Comment down below what you guys think. Who are the best rookie running backs going into the 2020 fantasy football season? Outside of that, we can cue the music. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.